She's only with him for his family's money." The words floated across the crowded charity gala, reaching my ears even though they weren't meant to. My mother-in-law, Diane Thompson, stood in a circle of her friends, crystal champagne flute in hand, her designer dress shimmering under the chandeliers. I froze by the appetizer table, my own glass halfway to my lips as I watched her lean in conspiratorially, unaware I was within earshot. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." Michael could have married anyone in Seattle, but he brings home this girl from a family nobody's ever heard of. Now suddenly she's driving a luxury car and living in our social circles. She raised an eyebrow meaningfully. "I mean, what else would you call it?" The women around her nodded sympathetically, and I felt my cheeks burn as I set down my untouched champagne. 3 years of marriage, and this was still how she saw me. A gold digger who had somehow tricked her precious son into matrimony. If only she knew. If only any of them knew. I met Michael Thompson at a tech conference in San Francisco 5 years ago. I was there representing my family's company, Chen Innovations, where I worked as Chief Operating Officer after earning my MBA at Stanford. Michael was there on behalf of his investment firm, looking for promising tech startups. We connected over coffee, debating market trends and sharing industry insights before personal details ever came up. He was charming, intelligent, and refreshingly down to earth for someone who, as I would later discover, came from one of Seattle's wealthiest families. When he asked for my number, I gave it without hesitation. Our early dates were simple: hiking trails around the Bay Area, small ethnic restaurants with amazing food, and long conversations about everything from childhood memories to future dreams. 3 months in, when he mentioned his family's background, the Thompson name that adorned buildings and appeared in Seattle's society pages, I was surprised but not particularly impressed. My own family had built their tech manufacturing business from nothing, working tirelessly since immigrating from Taiwan when I was a child. We weren't flashy about our success, and our wealth was relatively new compared to the old money of the Thompsons, but I had never wanted for anything material. What I didn't realize then was how much that family name meant to his parents, especially his mother. The first time Michael took me to meet them at their waterfront Bellevue mansion, Diane Thompson assessed me like a product that had failed. Quality control. Her smile never reached her eyes as she asked pointed questions about my background, my education, my family. "Chen Innovations? I don't believe I've heard of it," she said, swirling her wine with manicured fingers. "It's a tech manufacturing company based in Redmond," I explained. "My parents started it after immigrating here." "How inspiring," she replied with a thin smile. "A real American dream story." Throughout dinner, she made subtle references to Michael's ex-girlfriend Charlotte, the daughter of a prominent local judge who apparently still asked about him at country club gatherings. Robert, Michael's father, was more reserved but no warmer, questioning me about my career goals with skepticism thinly veiled as interest. Later that night, driving back to my hotel, Michael apologized. "They're just protective," he said, reaching for my hand. "They'll warm up once they get to know you." But they never did. Even after our engagement 6 months later, even after our wedding at the Seattle Four Seasons, which Diane had insisted on planning, transforming my vision of an intimate celebration into a social spectacle. Even after moving into our downtown Seattle condo, purchased with money I had saved, though no one in his family ever acknowledged that, I remained an outsider. The gold-digging outsider who had somehow entrapped their son. It didn't matter that I continued working at Chen Innovations, that I had my own substantial income. It didn't matter that I often paid for our vacations, or that I had never once asked Michael for money. In their eyes, I was the calculating immigrant's daughter who had clawed her way into their pristine social world, which brings me back to the charity gala, 3 years into our marriage, Watching my mother-in-law gossip about me to her friends while across the room, Michael chatted with business associates, oblivious. I took a deep breath and smoothed the front of my dress, a simple black Chanel I'd bought myself after landing a major contract for our company. Then I straightened my shoulders and walked directly toward Diane's circle, my heels clicking purposefully on the marble floor. "Diane," I said pleasantly, stepping into the group. "What a lovely event. The Children's Hospital must be grateful for your committee's hard work." Her smile froze, eyes widening slightly as she realized I might have overheard. The women around her shifted uncomfortably. "Emma, dear," she recovered quickly. "I was just telling everyone about the summer house. We're hosting a family weekend next month. I do hope you and Michael can make it this time." Her tone suggested our attendance was both obligatory and likely to be disappointing. "We wouldn't miss it," I replied, my smile fixed in place. "Actually, I wanted to thank you for recommending Dr. Abernathy. Michael finally went in for those tests you were concerned about." It was a calculated move, mentioning something personal enough to shut down her gossip without actually violating Michael's privacy. Michael had indeed gone for a routine physical, something Diane had been nagging about for months, convinced her son was working too hard. "Oh?" Concern flickered across her face, genuine for once. Whatever else she was, she did love her son. "And everything's fine, I hope?" "Perfectly," I assured her, though he said to tell you that yes, you were right about him needing more rest. She preened slightly at being declared right, and I excused myself, having successfully disrupted her gossip session and reminded her of my intimate connection to her son, small victories in a war I never asked to fight. Later that night, as Michael and I prepared for bed in our high-rise condo with its panoramic view of Elliott Bay, I considered telling him what I'd overheard. But what would be the point? It wasn't anything new, and Michael always defended his mother, insisting she just needed time to adjust to sharing him. "You're quiet tonight," he observed, coming up behind me as I removed my earrings at the vanity. "Just tired," I replied, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "The gala went well, though. Your mother seemed pleased with the turnout." He nodded, dropping a kiss on my shoulder. "She texted me about the summer house next month. We should go. Dad's been asking about some investment advice for their portfolio." I bit back a sigh. Of course they needed something from him. The Thompsons never sought our company without an agenda, but I just nodded and said, "Of course. It'll be nice to get out of the city." I didn't tell him about the overheard conversation. I didn't mention that his mother was still spreading rumors about my intentions. I didn't point out that after 3 years, I was still auditioning for a role in their family that they had no intention of giving me. Instead, I slid into bed beside my husband, a man caught between worlds, and wondered how long I could keep playing this game, because despite what Diane Thompson thought, I hadn't married Michael for money or status. I'd married him because I loved him. I just wasn't sure anymore if that was enough. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work commitments and preparations for the dreaded family weekend. Chen Innovations was negotiating a major contract with a European tech giant, and as COO, I was putting in long hours. Michael was equally busy with a new investment fund his firm was launching, often coming home after I was already asleep. The night before we were set to leave for the Thompson summer house, I was packing when my phone rang. It was my father, his voice tense in a way I rarely heard. "Emma, there's been an accident at the plant," he said without preamble. "Your mother and I are at Harborview Medical Center. 3 employees were injured when one of the prototype servers overheated and caught fire." My heart raced. How bad? "Burns, smoke, inhalation. One has a broken arm from the evacuation. They'll recover, but—" He paused. "The damage to the east wing is extensive. And the prototype, our entire new server line, it's gone." I sat heavily on the edge of the bed. The new server line was set to be the cornerstone of our deal with the European company. Without it, the contract would almost certainly fall through. And the production facility, that would take months and millions to rebuild. I'm coming to the hospital, I said, already reaching for my keys. No need tonight. They're stable, and your mother and I are heading home soon. But tomorrow. He sighed, sounding suddenly old. Tomorrow we need to figure out how to save the company. After I hung up, I sat staring at the wall, mind racing. Chen Innovations was family-owned with no outside investors. We had insurance, but it wouldn't cover the full cost of rebuilding while also fast-tracking a new prototype. Without additional capital, we might have to lay off employees, or worse, sell controlling interest to one of our competitors. When Michael came home an hour later, I was still sitting on the bed surrounded by half-packed luggage. "Everything okay?" he asked, loosening his tie. I looked up at him. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My husband of 3 years who still didn't fully understand my family's business or how important it was to me. There's been an accident at my family's production facility. A fire. His expression shifted to concern as he sat beside me. Is everyone all right? They will be, but the facility. Michael, we lost the prototype servers for the European contract. The entire East Wing is gone. He rubbed my back soothingly. The insurance will cover it, right? Not enough. Not fast. Enough. I looked at him directly. I can't go to your parents this weekend. I need to be with my family, figuring out how to save our company. Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, frustration, perhaps both. Emma, you know how important this weekend is. My parents are expecting us. Dad, specifically, wanted to talk about his investment portfolio. My family's company might be going under, I said slowly, disbelief coloring my voice. People could lose their jobs. People who've been with us since I was a child. I understand that, he said, though his tone suggested he didn't. Not really. But surely there's nothing that can't wait until Monday. We'd only be a few hours away if there's an emergency. I stared at him, suddenly seeing with perfect clarity the gulf between us. This is an emergency, Michael. I'm not going. His jaw tightened. You know how my mother will take this. She already thinks you don't make enough effort with the family. And there it was. His primary concern was his mother's reaction, not my family's crisis. I stood up, gathering my scattered belongings. Then she'll have to think that. I'm going to my parents' house tonight to start working on solutions. Emma, be reasonable. Reasonable? I cut him off, unexpected anger surging through me. What's reasonable about expecting me to abandon my family during a crisis to spend the weekend playing nice with people who've spent 3 years calling me a gold digger behind my back? He blinked, genuinely startled. What are you talking about? Your mother, Michael. At the charity gala, I overheard her telling her friends that I only married you for your family's money. And it wasn't the first time. I'm sure you misunderstood, he started, but I was already shoving clothes into an overnight bag. I didn't misunderstand. I never have. Your family has made it perfectly clear what they think of me, and you've let them. Well, now you have a choice to make. You can go to the summer house and help your father adjust his multi-million-dollar portfolio, or you can come with me and help my family save the business they built from nothing. Either way, I'm leaving in 5 minutes. I walked into the bathroom to gather my toiletries, hands shaking with a mixture of adrenaline and resolve. When I came out, Michael was sitting where I'd left him looking lost. I have obligations, he said quietly. Promises I made to my father. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. I understand. I have obligations too. I zipped up my bag and walked to the door, turning back one last time. The difference is, Michael, my family has never once questioned your place in it. They've welcomed you from day one without conditions or judgment. Think about that while you're at the summer house. The drive to my parents' modest Redmond home was a blur of streetlights and quiet tears. By the time I arrived, it was past midnight, but lights still burned in the kitchen. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her face lined with worry that only deepened when she saw I was alone. "Michael?" she asked simply. "Had prior commitments," I replied, stepping into her embrace. She held me tight, this woman who had worked alongside my father building a tech empire while still making sure there was home-cooked food on the table every night. "It's okay," she whispered. "We'll figure this out together." And in that moment, surrounded by the unconditional love I'd grown up with, I believed her. The next morning began a whirlwind of activity. My father and I went to survey the damage while my mother coordinated with insurance adjusters. The East Wing was even worse than described. Charred equipment, collapsed ceiling sections, the acrid smell of burned plastics and metals permeating everything. 6 months, the contractor said, shaking his head after an initial assessment. Minimum, and that's if you fast-track everything. 6 months meant losing the European contract. It meant potential layoffs for the production team. It meant watching my parents' life's work crumble because of one technical malfunction. Back at their house, gathered around the kitchen table with laptops and financial statements spread out before us, we ran the numbers again and again. Even liquidating my parents' retirement funds and my own savings wouldn't provide enough capital. Tor build quickly while also restarting the prototype development. We could approach venture capital firms, my father suggested, though his expression showed what he thought of that option. Outside investors would want control, would change the family-centered culture that made Chen Innovations special. "What about a bank loan?" my mother asked. I shook my head. With our projected cash flow disruption, no bank will extend enough credit on favorable terms. We worked through the night, ordering Chinese food and barely tasting it as we explored and discarded option after option. By Sunday morning, bleary-eyed and caffeine-jittery, we had reached an uncomfortable conclusion. Without a significant influx of capital within the next 2 weeks, we would need to start layoffs and consider selling patents to competitors just to stay afloat. I was refilling my coffee cup when my phone rang. Michael. I had texted him updates, but his responses had been brief. Now I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" "Emma." His voice sounded strained. "How bad is it?" I leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. "Bad? We're looking at major layoffs unless we can secure capital quickly." A pause. "My parents want to talk to you." I nearly dropped the phone. "What?" I told them about the situation. They want to help. Another pause. "We're on our way to your parents' house now." Before I could process this, he hung up. I stood frozen, coffee forgotten, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The Thompsons, who had spent years looking down on my family's business, now wanted to help? It didn't make sense. Unless... I found my parents in the dining room, huddled over spreadsheets. "Michael's parents are coming here," I announced. "Apparently, they want to help." My father looked up, surprise evident. "The Thompsons? Coming here?" We had invited Michael's parents to dinner exactly once, early in our relationship. Diane had spent the evening making thinly veiled comments about the modest size of my parents' home and the quaint decorations that reflected our Taiwanese heritage. My mother, ever gracious, had pretended not to notice, but we had never extended another invitation. "Michael says they want to help with the company," I said, still trying to believe it myself. My mother's eyes met mine, understanding passing, between us. "I'll make tea," she said simply. An hour later, a sleek black Mercedes pulled into the driveway. Michael emerged first, looking tense, followed by Robert and Diane Thompson, both appearing distinctly out of place on our quiet suburban street. I met them at the door, accepting Michael's brief, awkward hug. "Thank you for coming," I said formally, then led them into the living room where my parents waited. The initial greetings were stiff, years of unspoken judgments hanging in the air. But surprisingly, it was Robert who broke the ice. "David, Linda," he addressed my parents directly. "Michael has explained the situation with your facility. I'm sorry for the setback." He cleared his throat. "I'd like to propose a solution." My father nodded cautiously. "We're open to suggestions." Robert glanced at his wife, who sat perched on the edge of our sofa as if afraid to fully commit to it. "Diane and I have discussed it, and we would like to offer an investment in Chen Innovations. $2 million, enough to rebuild your facility and fast-track the prototype development." The room fell silent. $2 million would more than cover our immediate needs. It was a lifeline that would save the company. But I knew my father well enough to see the wariness in his eyes. "That's very generous," he said carefully. "May I ask what you'd expect in return?" Robert Thompson smiled, thinly, a 20% stake in the company. And there it was. Not charity, not family helping family, but a business opportunity. They had seen vulnerability and moved to capitalize on it. My mother spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. "May I ask why you're interested in our company now? You've never shown interest in our business before." Diane shifted uncomfortably, but Robert answered smoothly. "Michael has spoken highly of your operation over the years, and when he explained the European contract that's at risk, well, the potential return on investment is significant." I looked at Michael, who stood by the window, his expression unreadable. Had he sold them on this idea? Had he presented his in-laws' crisis as a business opportunity to please his parents? My father nodded slowly. "I see. And this offer, is it contingent on anything else? Any changes to management or operations you'd want to implement?" A flicker of something crossed Robert's face. "We would expect a seat on your board, of course, and perhaps some consideration of a merger with Thompson Holdings in the future, if synergies develop." I couldn't stay silent any longer. "A merger? You want to absorb my family's company?" Diane spoke for the first time, her smile condescending. "Emma, dear, this is how business works. The Thompson name would bring considerable prestige to your family's enterprise. Our enterprise has been successful for 20 years without the Thompson name," I replied, keeping my voice level with effort. "And yet here you are," she said, raising an eyebrow. "In need of a substantial bailout." The room tensed. Michael stepped forward. "Mother, that's not helpful." But the truth had been laid bare. This wasn't about family helping family. This was about the Thompsons, finally finding a way to prove their superiority, to position themselves as the saviors of the struggling immigrant business. They hadn't come here out of concern or compassion, but opportunity. My father stood, his posture dignified despite the stress of recent days. "Thank you for your offer, Robert, Diane. We'll need to discuss it privately before giving you an answer." Robert nodded, all business. "Of course. But I should mention, the offer is time-sensitive. We have other investment opportunities we're considering this quarter." My mother showed them to the door while I remained frozen in place, a storm of emotions brewing inside me. When Michael approached, I met his gaze directly. "Did you present this to them as a business opportunity?" He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I had to frame it in terms they would understand. "They want to help, Emma." "No," I said quietly. "They want to own. There's a difference." Once his parents were waiting in the car, Michael took my hands. This could solve everything, and maybe it would bring our families closer. I pulled away. At what cost? My family built this company from nothing, through hard work and sacrifice. Your parents have spent years looking down on that, and now they want to swoop in and take a piece when we're vulnerable, and you're facilitating it? I'm trying to help, he insisted. Are you? Or are you finally finding a way to make your gold-digging wife and her immigrant family acceptable to the almighty Thompsons? He flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? Your mother called me a gold digger at the charity gala, Michael. To her friends. And now she's trying to buy her way into my family's company. Can you really not see the irony? Before he could. Respond, my father called from the dining room. Emma, we need to talk. I hesitated, then said to Michael, You should go. Your parents are waiting. We'll let you know our decision. Looking torn, he finally nodded and left. Through the window, I watched him join his parents in their luxury car, a physical representation of the divide that had always existed between our worlds. In the dining room, my parents sat close together, a united front as always. What do you think? My father asked me. I sank into a chair. I think the Thompsons have never respected us or what we've built. I think they see this as a chance to prove their superiority, but I sighed, facing reality. I also think we need the capital. My mother reached for my hand. There are other options. We've survived challenges before. Not like this, my father said quietly. The timing is critical with the European contract. We sat in silence, weighing impossible choices. Then my mother straightened, a familiar determination in her eyes. What if we counter their offer? She suggested. Accept the investment but reject the board seat and any future merger discussions. My father considered this. They might walk away. They might, she acknowledged. But Robert Thompson is a businessman first. If the return is attractive enough, he may accept our terms. And if not, I added, a plan forming, I have another idea. The next morning I called Michael and asked him to bring his parents back for another meeting. They arrived looking confident, clearly expecting us to accept their terms without negotiation. This time, we met in my father's home office. On the desk lay a counter-proposal my parents and I had stayed up half the night crafting. We appreciate your offer, my father began, his tone professional. But we cannot accept the terms as presented. Robert Thompson's expression hardened slightly. I see. However, my father continued, we are prepared to accept the $2 million investment in exchange for a 15% non-controlling stake. No board seat, no future merger considerations. Diane made a small sound of disbelief. That's hardly reasonable given the risk we'd be taking, I spoke up. Our company's 5-year projected growth with the European contract exceeds 40% annually. A 15% stake would return your investment many times over. Robert leaned forward. If those projections materialize, that's a significant if, given your current situation. We're also prepared to offer personal guarantees against your investment, I continued. If the company fails to meet agreed-upon benchmarks, my parents and I will repay your investment from our personal assets. This was the part that had kept us up debating. It was a risk, a massive one. But we were betting on ourselves, on the company we had built and the designs we had created. Michael, who had been silent until now, looked at me with new eyes, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. Robert and Diane exchanged glances. We need to discuss this privately, he said. Of course, my father replied. You can use the office. We'll wait in the living room. As we stood to leave, Diane's gaze swept around the modest room with its simple furniture and family photos. I still don't understand why you're fighting this so hard. Our offer would bring the Chen name into much more prominent circles. I paused at the door. Mrs. Thompson, our name is already respected in the circles that matter to us. We built this company so that my children, your grandchildren someday, would know that their heritage is something to be proud of, not something to be improved upon by association with another family name. Her eyes widened slightly, and for once she had no ready response. In the living room, Michael pulled me aside. "What are you doing? They're trying to help." "No, they're trying to buy what they couldn't diminish," I corrected him. "There's a difference. And it's time they understood that my family doesn't need to be improved by association with yours." His expression shifted from frustration to something like realization. "Is that what you think I believe too?" Before I could answer, the office door opened, and his parents emerged. Robert's face was unreadable as he approached my father. "We've considered your counteroffer," he said formally. "While the terms are not what we initially proposed, we recognize the potential value. We accept, with one condition, quarterly financial reviews to monitor our investment." My father nodded. "Acceptable, provided those reviews remain confidential." Just like that, it was done. My parents' company would survive, and the Thompsons would profit from it, but they wouldn't control it. As Robert and my father shook hands, I caught Diane watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not respect, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of reassessment. Later, after the lawyers had been called and preliminary papers signed, after Robert and Diane had left, to attend some society function, Michael and I stood in my parents' backyard, the weight of unspoken words between us. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I didn't see it before. How they treated you, how they talked about your family. Or maybe I didn't want to see it." I studied him, this man I had married for love, who was finally starting to understand what that should mean. And now? Now I see that I've been caught in the middle, trying to please everyone without standing up for what matters most. He took my hands. "You matter most, Emma. You and the family we might build together someday. Not my parents' approval, not their social standing." "They called me a gold digger," I said quietly. "For years. While I worked 60-hour weeks at my family's company and paid for our vacations." He winced. "I know. And I let it happen because it was easier than confronting them." He squeezed my hands. "That ends today. From now on, we're a team. Your family is my family." I wanted to believe him. After the events of the past few days, I almost could. "It won't be easy. Your mother won't change overnight." "Maybe not," he acknowledged. "But I've changed. And that's a start." As the sun set over my childhood home, with my parents inside celebrating the company's salvation and my husband beside me promising a new beginning, I allowed myself to hope. Not that the Thompsons would suddenly embrace me as their equal, but that Michael had finally chosen which family truly deserved his loyalty. The gold digger had turned out to be the one with the gold all along. Not just financial wealth, but the richness of a family whose love had never been conditional, whose respect had never needed to be earned through the right connections or social standing. And that was worth more than all the Thompson millions combined. The Thompson family investment in Chen Innovations was finalized with surprising speed. Within 2 weeks, the money was transferred, contracts were signed, and reconstruction on the east wing of the production facility had begun. From the outside, it appeared to be a simple business transaction, perhaps even a heartwarming story of a family coming together in crisis. The reality, as always with the Thompsons, was far more complicated. The morning after the papers were signed, I arrived at our temporary offices to find a massive flower arrangement blocking the reception desk. The card, written in Diane's elegant script, read, "To our newest business partners, looking forward. To our quarterly reviews. Warmly, Robert and Diane Thompson." My assistant eyed the arrangement with suspicion as I read the card. "Should I find a place for these?" she asked. "The break room," I decided. "Everyone should get to enjoy them." But the flowers were just the beginning. Later that day, Robert Thompson called my father directly. bypassing me, the COO, to suggest the name of a contractor who could expedite our rebuilding process. The day after that, Diane sent over a list of interior designers who could modernize our offices once reconstruction was complete. Each gesture came wrapped in the guise of helpfulness, but the message was clear. Now that the Thompsons had a financial stake in our company, they expected influence. My father, ever diplomatic, thanked them for their suggestions and continued, using our existing contractors. My mother began screening calls at their home, and I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation with Michael, who had returned to our condo the day after the investment deal was signed, an olive branch in the form of my favorite takeout and a tentative smile. "They're just trying to help," he said when I mentioned the barrage of unsolicited advice. We were sitting on our balcony overlooking the water, the Seattle skyline lit up against the night. "Mom called me today. She wants to host a dinner to celebrate the partnership." I set down my wine glass carefully. "A partnership implies equal standing, Michael. Your parents see this as a rescue, one that gives them the right to remake my family's company in their image." "That's not—" "It is," I interrupted gently. "The flowers, the contractor recommendations, the interior designers. They're marking their territory. Next will be suggestions about our branding, our corporate culture, our hiring practices." Michael frowned. "You're being paranoid." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the email Diane had sent me that afternoon, suggesting we consider updating the company name to something with broader market appeal than Chen Innovations. His expression fell. "She shouldn't have done that." "No, she shouldn't have. But she did, because she still doesn't respect what my family has built. She still sees us as somehow less than, despite the fact that we're the ones with the patents, the expertise, and the vision that's going to multiply her investment." Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from moments when he felt caught between loyalties. "What do you want me to do? They're my parents." "And they're my in-laws," I replied. "We need boundaries, Michael, clear ones, or this investment will destroy not just my family's company, but our marriage." He nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure he fully understood the stakes. For 3 years, I had compromised, softened my edges, swallowed my pride to accommodate his family's subtle and not-so-subtle disdain. The investment had shifted the power dynamics, but it hadn't changed the fundamental issue. The Thompsons believed their money made them superior, and no business deal would alter that perspective. The celebration dinner was scheduled for the following weekend at an exclusive restaurant overlooking Lake Washington. As Michael and I drove there, I mentally prepared for an evening of navigating subtext and veiled insults. "Remember, this is important to them," Michael said as we pulled into valet parking. "Try to be appreciative." "I am appreciative of the investment," I said evenly. "What I don't appreciate is the condescension that comes with it." He sighed, clearly hoping for an evening without conflict. "Just try? For me?" And there it was, the request that had defined our marriage. Compromise for me, endure for me, accept disrespect for me. I squeezed his hand but said nothing. As we walked into the restaurant, Diane and Robert were already seated at a prime table near the windows. Diane wore diamonds at her throat and wrists, her silver hair perfectly styled. Robert's custom suit probably cost more than what we paid, our production line workers in a month. They stood as we approached, Diane air-kissing my cheek while Robert shook Michael's hand firmly. "Emma, darling, that dress is lovely," Diane said, assessing my simple black sheath with approving eyes. "Chanel?" "Yes," I replied, not mentioning I'd owned it for years. "Your necklace is stunning." She touched the diamonds. "A gift from Robert for our 30th anniversary. Sometimes the classics are worth the investment." The double meaning wasn't lost on me. I was the investment they doubted would pay off, while Michael was the classic they'd hoped would choose differently. I smiled thinly and took my seat, Robert ordered champagne before we'd even opened our menus. A toast, he announced once our glasses were filled. To new partnerships and family connections finally making good business sense. I felt Michael tense beside me, but kept my expression neutral as we clinked glasses. The meal progressed with superficial pleasantries. Diane asked about the reconstruction timeline. Robert inquired about the European contract negotiations. I answered professionally, maintaining the facade of cordial relations while underneath, my frustration simmered. Then, as dessert was being served, Robert cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about your board structure," he said, addressing me directly for once. "With our investment, it might make sense to bring in some outside perspectives. I know several individuals with extensive tech experience who could provide valuable guidance." And there it was. The first direct attempt to reshape our company. Governance, barely 2 weeks after signing an agreement that explicitly denied them board representation. I set down my fork. "Our board structure has served us well for 20 years, I replied evenly. "We're not looking to change it at present." Robert's smile tightened. Sometimes fresh eyes see opportunities others miss. Chen Innovations has been successful, certainly, but with the right connections, it could be transformative. The implication was clear. We had reached our ceiling without the Thompsons' social and business networks. Before I could respond, Michael jumped in. "Dad, remember the agreement was for a non-controlling investment. Board composition wasn't part of the deal." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Diane looked between her husband and son, clearly displeased by the disagreement. Robert's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course," he said finally. "Just a suggestion for future consideration." "And we appreciate that," Michael replied, smoothly. "But Emma and her family have built an incredible company on their own terms. That's what we're investing in, their vision, not a revised version of it." I glanced at my husband in surprise. Never before had he so directly contradicted his father, especially in defense of my family's autonomy. Diane looked equally shocked, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. "Well," she said after a moment, her voice artificially bright. "Speaking of visions, I've been talking with Marianne Bishop. You remember her, Michael. Her husband runs that commercial real estate firm. And she's simply raving about this interior designer who did their offices. Very modern, very impressive. I thought perhaps for the Chen reception area." As she continued, describing a sterile chrome and glass aesthetic that would have been completely at odds with the warm, functional space my parents had created, I watched Michael's expression. For the first time, I saw him truly hearing his mother's suggestions for what they were. Not helpful advice, but attempts to remake something she fundamentally didn't respect. "Mom," he interrupted gently, "I think what made us interested in this investment was Chen Innovations' unique culture and approach. Changing that would undermine what makes it special." Diane blinked, unused to being contradicted twice in one evening. "I'm simply suggesting some modernization, dear. First impressions matter in business." "Chen's first impressions are excellent," Michael replied. "Their retention rate with both employees and clients is industry-leading. Whatever they're doing is working." The "they" stung a little. I was still not fully "we" with my own husband when it came to my family's company, but his defense was still unexpected and welcome. The dinner concluded with strained smiles and promises to do it again soon that no one truly meant. As we drove home, I reached for Michael's hand. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for what you said back there." He kept his eyes on the road, but his fingers tightened around mine. "I meant it, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see what they were doing. They're your parents. It's hard to see them clearly sometimes. They're also wrong about your family and your company," he said firmly, "and I'm done letting them think I agree with them." It was a start, a single dinner, a few moments of solidarity, but I allowed myself to hope it signaled a deeper shift. Perhaps the crisis and the investment had forced Michael to finally see the dynamic from my perspective, to recognize the pattern of dismissal and condescension I'd been enduring for years. That hope lasted exactly 3 days. On Tuesday morning, I arrived at our temporary headquarters to find my assistant looking uncomfortable. "There's someone waiting in your office," she said, avoiding my eyes. "Mrs. Thompson, she said it was important." A wave of irritation washed over me. Diane had never visited our offices before the investment. Now she felt entitled to wait in my private space without an appointment. I took a deep breath, reminded myself of the business relationship we now shared, and pushed open my office door. Diane sat in my chair behind my desk, looking through what appeared to be our product development portfolio. She glanced up as I entered, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Emma, darling, hope you don't mind. The receptionist said you'd be in shortly, and I thought I'd review some materials while I waited." I set my bag down carefully. "Diane, this is a surprise." "Is it?" She closed the portfolio, not bothering to look apologetic for examining confidential documents. "I thought we should talk woman to woman. Clear the air after dinner the other night." I gestured to the visitor chair opposite my desk. "Of course. Would you mind?" She hesitated, then rose from my chair with deliberate slowness, making the relinquishment of my own space feel like a concession she was graciously granting. I took my seat as she settled across from me, crossing her legs elegantly. "You know, Emma," she began, her voice taking on the condescending tone I knew so well, "I've always admired your tenacity. Coming to this country, building a business, from nothing. It's very American dream." "My parents built the business," I corrected. "I joined after business school." She waved this distinction away. "The point is, you've done well for yourselves, but there's a ceiling to how far you can go without the right connections, the right image. Is that why you're here? To help us with our image?" Her smile tightened. "I'm here because I care about my son, and about our investment, of course. The investment agreement is clear, Diane. 15%, non-controlling, quarterly. Reviews only." "On paper, yes." She leaned forward slightly. "But surely you understand that business is about relationships, about mutual benefit. The Thompsons can open doors for Chen Innovations that would otherwise remain closed. All we ask is that you consider our guidance." The audacity was breathtaking. 3 years of treating me like an opportunist, and now she expected me to eagerly accept their guidance as some sort of privilege. "We appreciate the investment," I said carefully, "and we're confident it will yield significant returns. But Chen Innovations reached this point because of my parents' vision and expertise, not despite it. That won't change." Her expression hardened. "You know, when Michael told us about the fire, my first thought was concern for your family. My second was that perhaps this was an opportunity for our families to finally align their interests. By align, you mean us following your lead. By align, I mean recognizing the value the Thompson name could bring to your enterprise." She straightened her already impeccable blazer. "The tech world is changing, Emma. Small family companies are being swallowed by conglomerates. Without proper positioning, Chen Innovations could easily become obsolete." The threat was veiled but unmistakable. Accept their influence or face their opposition that could potentially damage us more than the fire had. "Our patents are industry-leading," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Our client relationships are strong, and now, thanks to your investment, our facility will be rebuilt with upgraded capabilities. We're positioned exactly where we want to." Diane sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn child. "Michael always said you were strong-willed. I had hoped that for his sake, for the sake of harmony in your marriage, you might be more receptive to working together. And there it was, the real threat, not to the company, but to my marriage. The implication that by standing firm for my family's business, I was somehow failing as Michael's wife. My marriage is not part of our business arrangement, I said, my voice cooler now. And Michael understands the importance of maintaining Chen Innovations' independence. Does he? She asked, raising a perfectly groomed eyebrow. Because Robert had a very different impression after their golf game yesterday. My stomach tightened. Michael hadn't mentioned golfing with his father. What impression is that? That Michael recognizes the potential for greater Thompson involvement could be beneficial for everyone. That he's open to persuasion on the matter. She stood, gathering her designer handbag. Think about it, Emma. This isn't just about business. It's about family. And sometimes compromises are necessary for family harmony. After she left, I sat at my desk, staring at the portfolio she had been examining, trying to process what had just happened. Had Michael really discussed greater Thompson involvement with his father after defending us at dinner? Or was Diane manipulating the situation, playing on my insecurities to drive a wedge between us? I called Michael, but it went to voicemail. We need to talk, I said after the beep. Your mother just left my office. Call me back. He didn't call back until late afternoon, by which time my anxiety had morphed into simmering anger. Hey, he said, his voice cautious. Sorry I missed your call. I was in meetings all day. Did you golf with your father yesterday? A pause. Yes. Why? Why didn't you tell me? I didn't think it was important. His tone turned defensive. It was just golf, Emma. Just golf where you discussed greater Thompson involvement in my family's company? Another longer pause. He brought it up. I didn't agree to anything. But you didn't shut it down either, did you? The realization hit me with crushing clarity. After everything you said at dinner, you still couldn't actually stand up to him. That's not fair. I told him we needed to respect the terms of the agreement. And yet your mother felt confident enough to come to my office today and imply that you were open to persuasion, that I was the obstacle to family harmony. Michael sighed heavily. You know how they are. They push. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything, Michael. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. It means that after 3 years of marriage, after everything we just went through with the fire and the investment, you still can't draw a clear boundary with your parents when it comes to me or my family. What do you want from me? He demanded. They're my parents, Emma, and they did just invest $2 million to save your family's company. To buy a piece of it, I corrected. Not out of generosity or because they suddenly respect what we've built, but because they saw an opportunity to gain control they couldn't get otherwise. That's not. It is, I cut him off. And deep down, you know it is. That's why you feel guilty, why you can't just tell them no. Because part of you agrees with them. Part of you has always thought your family name, your family connections, were doing me a favor. The silence that followed told me I'd hit a nerve. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight with suppressed emotion. That's not true. I married you because I love you, not because of where you came from. Loving me and respecting me aren't the same thing, Michael. I blinked back unexpected tears. I have a meeting. We'll talk tonight. I hung up before he could respond, then sat at my desk, staring out at the Seattle skyline through my office window. The investment was supposed to save my family's company, not tear apart my marriage. But perhaps it had simply exposed fractures that had been there all along, hidden beneath polite smiles and social niceties. That evening, I worked late, purposely, avoiding the conversation awaiting me at home. It was past 9 when I finally packed up, my phone filled with texts from Michael asking when I'd be back. As I walked to my car in the nearly empty parking garage, I noticed a familiar Mercedes idling near the exit. Robert Thompson sat behind the wheel, alone. For a moment, I considered pretending I hadn't seen him, driving away without acknowledgement. But something in his posture, expectant, determined, told me this wasn't a coincidence. He had been waiting for me. I approached his car and he lowered the passenger window. "Emma, I was hoping to catch you." "At my office after hours without calling first?" He had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I was in the area. Thought we might talk privately without additional perspectives complicating things." Without Diane, he meant. Or Michael. Or my parents. I hesitated, then made a decision. Whatever Robert wanted to say, I needed to hear it directly, without filters or intermediaries. "There's a coffee shop 2 blocks down," I said. "I'll meet you there." 10 minutes later, we sat across from each other in a quiet corner of an upscale cafe. Robert Thompson looked out of place among the students and young professionals with their laptops, his tailored suit and commanding presence drawing curious glances. "I'll be direct," he said after our coffees arrived. "I think we got off on the wrong foot with this investment." The wrong foot being that my family expected the terms of our agreement to be respected. His mouth quirked in what might have been reluctant admiration. "You remind me of myself at your age. Ambitious. Protective of what you've built." "What my parents built," I corrected. "With respect, Mr. Thompson, what is it you want to discuss?" He leaned back, studying me with calculating eyes. "I want to discuss potential. Chen Innovations has good technology, solid patents, but it's limited by scale, by connections. With the right partnerships, it could be exponentially more valuable. And you're offering those partnerships. I'm offering a path forward that benefits everyone. A gradual integration of Chen into Thompson Holdings, not immediately but over time, with appropriate compensation and positions for your family, of course." The audacity was almost impressive. That wasn't our agreement. "Agreements evolve, Emma. Businesses adapt. Surely with your Stanford MBA, you understand that." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "What I understand is that you've never respected my family's company until you saw an opportunity to acquire it at a vulnerable moment. What I don't understand is why you're approaching me alone, after hours, instead of scheduling a proper business meeting with my father." Robert's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Because you're family now, and because you have influence over Michael. So this is about Michael." "This is about legacy," he corrected. "The Thompson legacy, which includes Michael, and now you. I've built something significant, Emma. Something that should grow and thrive for generations. Adding Chen's technology to our portfolio strengthens that legacy. At the expense of my family's legacy, your family would be well compensated." "It's not about compensation," I said, frustration seeping into my voice despite my efforts to remain professional. "It's about respect. Recognition that what my immigrant parents built from nothing has value beyond what you can extract from it for the greater glory of the Thompson name." Robert looked genuinely puzzled, as if the concept simply didn't compute. "Of course it has value. That's why we invested." "No, you invested because you saw weakness and opportunity. If you truly valued what Chen Innovations is, you wouldn't be sitting here proposing to dismantle it and absorb it into your holdings." He sighed, the sound of a man unaccustomed to having his logic questioned. "You're being emotional about a business decision. And you're being calculating about a family matter," I countered. "You can't separate the two when you're dealing with a family company." Robert's expression hardened. "Consider this carefully, Emma. Your position at Chen is secure now. But businesses change. Markets shift. The protection of the Thompson name could ensure your future regardless of what happens with Chen Innovations." The threat was subtle but clear. Side with him, help him acquire my family's company, and my position would be protected. Resist, and I might find myself vulnerable when the next crisis hit. "Mr. Thompson," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I appreciate your concern for my future. But my loyalty is to my family and the company they built. I won't help you undermine either. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. Michael said you were stubborn. Michael also signed off on our investment agreement, which explicitly prevents what you're proposing. Michael is my son, Robert said, his tone softening slightly. He understands family obligations, generational responsibility. Yes, he does, I agreed, but perhaps not in the way you think. We finished our coffees in tense silence, the conversation clearly over, but neither of us quite ready to acknowledge its implications. As we stood to leave, Robert placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. Think about what I've said, Emma. This isn't personal, it's business. I met his gaze directly. With family companies, Mr. Thompson, it's always personal. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with the implications of Robert's approach. Did Michael know his father was proposing this backdoor acquisition? Was he complicit or merely caught? In the middle of his father's ambitions and my family's independence? Our condo was dark when I arrived, save for a single lamp in the living room. Michael sat on the couch, a tumbler of whiskey in hand, staring out at the night skyline. Your father ambushed me outside the office, I said without preamble. He proposed absorbing Chen Innovations into Thompson Holdings. Michael's head snapped up, surprise evident in his expression. He what? When? Tonight. We had coffee. He suggested I could help facilitate a gradual integration of our company into yours. Emma, I had no idea. Didn't you? I interrupted, dropping my bag and coat on a chair. After your golf game, after your mother's visit to my office. Are you really going to tell me you had no idea this was their plan all along? He stood, setting down his glass. I knew they wanted more involvement than the agreement allows. I didn't know my father would approach you directly. Would it have mattered if you did? Would you have stopped him? His hesitation was answer enough. I sank onto the edge of the sofa, suddenly exhausted. This isn't going to work, Michael. The investment? We can reinforce the boundaries. Not just the investment. Us. This marriage. I can't keep fighting your parents' perception of me, of my family. While you stand in the middle, unwilling to choose a side. He paled. That's not fair. I love you. I want our marriage to work. Love isn't enough when there's no respect, I said quietly. Your parents have never respected me or my family, and deep down, some part of you shares their perspective. That's why you can't fully stand up to them. That's not true, he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? When your mother calls me a gold digger at public events, when your father tries to engineer a hostile takeover of my family's company, you offer token resistance but ultimately retreat to the middle ground, because confronting them would mean confronting your own biases. Michael ran a hand through his hair, his distress evident. What do you want from me, Emma? They're my parents. I can't just cut them off. I've never asked you to cut them off. I've asked you to draw boundaries, to stand with me, fully and unequivocally, when they disrespect me or my family. I looked up at him, seeing with painful clarity the gap between us that had always existed. But you can't, because part of you believes they're right. That's not. It is, I said gently. And until you can recognize that, nothing will change. Your parents will continue undermining me, undermining my family's company, and you'll continue making excuses for them while asking me to compromise for the sake of peace. We stared at each other across the living room, the city lights reflected in the windows behind us, illuminating the crossroads we had reached. I had spent 3 years trying to earn the respect of people who had decided, from the moment they met me, that I was unworthy of their son. And Michael, caught between worlds, had never fully committed to building one of our own. I think I should stay at my parents' tonight, I said finally. We both need space to think. Michael's face crumpled. Emma, please, we can fix this. Can we? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like your parents saw an opportunity to finally get what they've always wanted. Control over my family's company and leverage to prove they were right about me all along. And you, even knowing what they've done, can't bring yourself to take a definitive stand against them. He had no answer for that, because there was none that wouldn't confirm what I already knew. When forced to choose between his parents' approval and his wife's dignity, Michael Thompson would always try to preserve both, and in doing so, sacrifice neither. I packed an overnight bag in silence, my mind already shifting to the practical implications of what was happening. The investment was legally binding. We couldn't simply return the money, but we could enforce the non-interference clauses rigorously. We could rebuild the company while maintaining distance from the Thompsons' influence, and I could finally acknowledge what I had been avoiding for years, that marrying into a family that saw me as fundamentally inferior would never lead to happiness, no matter how much I loved their son. As I reached the door, Michael spoke again, his voice raw. I do respect you, Emma, and your family. I always have. I paused, one hand on the doorknob. Then prove it, not with words, but with actions. Stand with me against your parents' attempts to undermine everything my family has built. I didn't wait for his response. The ball was in his court now. And for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't going to settle for anything less than the full-throated defense I deserved. My parents' home hadn't changed since my childhood. The same comfortable furniture, the same family photos lining the hallway, the same faint scent of my mother's, jasmine tea lingering in the air. As I let myself in with my key, the familiar surroundings wrapped around me like a warm embrace. Emma? My mother emerged from the kitchen, surprise evident on her face. Is everything okay? I set my overnight bag on the floor, suddenly overwhelmed. Not really, I admitted. She didn't ask for explanations, just opened her arms. I stepped into her embrace, breathing in the comforting scent of home, and let myself be held the way only a mother can hold you, like you're simultaneously the most precious thing in the world and strong enough to face whatever comes. Tea, she said decisively, pulling back to examine my face. And then you'll tell me everything. 20 minutes later, seated at the kitchen table with steaming cups of oolong, I had poured out the whole story. Diane's visit to my office, Robert's ambush, Michael's inability to take a definitive stand. My mother listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful. When I finished, she wrapped her hands around her cup, warming them against the porcelain. Your father and I wondered if this might happen, she said finally. The Thompsons have built their empire by acquisition, not innovation. It's their pattern. You knew they'd try to take over the company? I asked, surprised. She smiled faintly. We hoped they wouldn't, but we prepared for the possibility. She reached across the table to cover my hand with hers. What we didn't anticipate was how it would affect your marriage. I don't know if there's a marriage left to affect, I said softly. My mother's gaze was penetrating. Do you love him? Yes, I answered without hesitation. But love isn't always enough. No, she agreed. It isn't. But it isn't nothing either. I sipped my tea, letting her words settle. What would you do? If it were you and Dad? She considered this, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. I would remember that in business, as in marriage, principles matter. Compromising on small things is necessary. Compromising on what you fundamentally believe is not. And if someone asks you to, then they're not seeing you clearly, and perhaps it's time they learn to. We sat in companionable silence after that, the weight of decisions yet to be made hovering between us. Eventually, my father came home from a late meeting at the factory site, his face lighting with surprise and concern when he saw me at the table. Everything okay, Butterfly? He asked. using the childhood nickname I hadn't heard in years. My mother answered for me. The Thompsons are making their move earlier than we expected. Understanding dawned on his face. The separate approaches? She nodded. Robert went directly to Emma tonight. Proposed a gradual integration of our company into their holdings. My father's expression hardened. I see. He joined us at the table, his workday exhaustion momentarily forgotten. And Michael? Is caught in the middle, I said. Or at least that's where he's placing himself. My father nodded slowly. It's a difficult position for a son, but eventually, a man must decide what kind of man he wants to be, regardless of his father's shadow. It was a gentle assessment, more compassionate than I had managed. But then, my father had always seen people clearly, with neither illusions nor undue judgment. What do we do about the company? I asked, steering the conversation back to more immediate concerns. We proceed as planned, my father said firmly. The investment agreement is legally binding. They have no controlling interest. We rebuild, we fulfill the European contract, we grow on our terms. And if they push harder, try to force a merger or acquisition? My mother's smile was surprisingly fierce. Then they learn what it means to underestimate the Chen family. I slept in my childhood bedroom that night, surrounded by the relics of a simpler time. Debate trophies, science, fair ribbons, photos of high school friends I hadn't seen in years. As I drifted off, I found myself wondering where Michael was, what he was thinking, whether he was finally confronting the truth about his parents or constructing new justifications for their behavior. Morning came with the ping of my phone. Multiple texts from Michael, increasingly urgent. 6:15 a.m. Are you okay? Please let me know you're safe. 7:30 a.m. I spoke with my father. We need to talk. 8:03 a.m. Emma, please, at least tell me you're all right. I responded simply, I'm at my parents'. I'm fine. Need space to think. His reply was immediate. Can we meet today, please? I stared at the screen, considering. Part of me wanted to maintain distance, to let him stew in the consequences of his indecision. But another part recognized that nothing would be resolved without conversation, without giving him the chance to finally choose a side. Lunch, 1 p.m., the cafe on Wallingford. He sent back a thumbs up, nothing more. I set my phone down and headed for the shower, mentally preparing for what would likely be one of the most important conversations of our marriage. The cafe was neutral territory, neither the condo we shared nor my family home, neither his. Corporate territory, nor mine. I arrived early, securing a quiet corner table where we could speak privately. Michael walked in at exactly 1 gad, looking as though he hadn't slept. His usually perfectly styled hair was unsettled, his eyes shadowed. He slid into the seat across from me, his movements hesitant. Thank you for meeting me. You said you spoke with your father, I replied, skipping pleasantries. He nodded, his expression grim. After you left last night, I called him. Asked him directly about his conversation with you. And? He didn't deny it. Said he was exploring opportunities to maximize our investment. Michael's fingers twisted the paper napkin in front of him. I told him it was unacceptable, that the agreement specifically prevented the kind of acquisition he was proposing. I raised an eyebrow, waiting for the rest. Michael had stood up to his father before, in small ways. It never lasted. He met my gaze directly. He said I was being naive. That business is business, and sentiment has no place in it. That someday I'd understand the importance of consolidating power. Michael's jaw tightened. I told him I understood, perfectly, that he saw an opportunity to essentially steal a valuable company at a vulnerable moment and was using family connections to facilitate it. This was new. Michael had never spoken to his father that way before, at least not that I knew of. How did he respond? Not well. A faint, humorless smile crossed Michael's face. He reminded me that I'm a Thompson, that I have obligations to the family legacy. I told him that as your husband, I also have obligations to you and your family. The barista approached with coffee for both of us. Michael must have ordered when he arrived. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, trying to process what I was hearing. And your mother? His expression clouded. She's disappointed, says I'm throwing away opportunities because I can't manage my wife properly. He shook his head. I don't think they've ever really seen you, Emma. Seen what you've built, what you're capable of. They're so fixated on the narrative they created when we first met that they can't recognize how wrong they've been. It was the most direct acknowledgement he had ever made of his parents' treatment of me. But 3 years of disappointment had made me cautious. Words are important, Michael, but they're not enough. Your parents are actively trying to undermine my family's company, despite a legal agreement preventing exactly that. What are you going to do about it? He straightened in his chair, something resolute settling over his features. I've already done it. This morning, I went to our lawyer. I've legally recused myself from any Thompson Holdings decisions regarding Chen Innovations. I've also informed the board that any attempt to acquire or influence Chen beyond the terms of our agreement will be met with my formal opposition. I nearly dropped my coffee. You went against your father to the board? Michael nodded, his expression a mix of determination and lingering disbelief at his own actions. It was the right thing to do, the only thing I could do if I wanted to look myself in the mirror, or have any hope of salvaging our marriage. For the first time since Robert's ambush, I felt a flicker of hope. But caution still prevailed. What about personally? Family dinners, social events? I told them we need space, that their treatment of you, of your family, has been unacceptable, that until they can show genuine respect, we'll be limiting our contact. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. I should have done it years ago, Emma. I see that now. I was so caught in trying to please everyone that I ended up betraying the one person who should have come first. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome in the public setting. Why now? What changed? You left, he said simply, and I finally had to confront the possibility of a life without you, a life where I chose my parents' approval over your happiness. It wasn't a future I could accept. I wanted to believe him. After 3 years of half measures and compromises, I desperately wanted to believe that Michael had finally chosen definitively. But experience had taught me caution. They'll push back, I warned. Your mother especially. She won't accept being cut off from her son. Probably not, he agreed. But that's for me to handle, not you. You've carried this burden alone for too long. We talked for nearly 2 hours, draining our coffee cups and ordering second ones, then food neither of us really ate. Michael shared more details of his confrontation with his father, the shock on the older man's face when his usually compliant son had finally drawn a hard line. I told him about my conversation with my parents, their quiet confidence in the face of the Thompsons' machinations. They're not surprised by any of this, I said. They've been dealing with people underestimating them their entire lives. First, as immigrants, then as entrepreneurs. Michael nodded thoughtfully. My parents have never built anything from scratch. They've acquired, expanded, leveraged. But creation, true innovation, that's what your parents have that mine could never understand. It was an insight I hadn't expected from him, a recognition of the fundamental difference in values between our families. As we prepared to leave, the practical question still hung between us. Are you coming home? Michael asked, his voice carefully neutral, giving me space to say no. I hesitated. I think I need another night, to process everything, to be sure. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. I understand. Take whatever time you need. I'll be there. When you're ready. We parted on the sidewalk outside the cafe, his kiss on my cheek gentle and uncertain. I watched him walk to his car. This man I had loved enough to marry despite the complications of his family, who might finally be becoming the partner I had always believed he could be. But one conversation, one day of resolve, couldn't erase 3 years of patterns. I needed to see if his new boundaries would hold when tested, and they would be tested. Of that, I had no doubt. I returned to my parents' house to find my father on the phone in his study, his voice uncharacteristically sharp. As I approached, he looked up, his expression grim. I understand the terms of our agreement perfectly. Robert, he was saying, what I don't understand is why you're attempting to circumvent them less than a month after signing. My stomach dropped. Robert Thompson was still pushing, despite Michael's warning. My father listened for a moment, then shook his head. No, that won't be possible. Chen Innovations is not interested in exploring synergies or integration opportunities. We accepted your investment on clearly defined terms. If those terms no longer suit you, we can discuss buyback options. Another pause. I see. Then I suggest you review the agreement with your legal team. Good day. He hung up, exhaling. Slowly. Your father-in-law is persistent. I'll give him that. What did he want? I asked, though I could guess. To arrange a meeting to discuss strategic alignment. Same acquisition attempt, different words. My father leaned back in his chair, studying me. How was your lunch with Michael? I sank into the chair opposite his desk. Surprising. He says he's drawn a line with his parents, recused himself from any Thompson Holdings decisions about... Chen told the board he'd oppose any acquisition attempts. My father's eyebrows rose. That's significant? Yes. I twisted my wedding ring, a habit I'd developed when anxious. I just don't know if it will last when they really apply pressure. People can surprise you, my father said thoughtfully. For better or worse. The question is whether you're willing to give him the chance to surprise you positively. Before I could answer, my phone rang, the Chen Innovations office line. Emma Chen, I answered, professional mode engaging automatically. Ms. Chen, this is Lena from reception, came the harried voice of our front desk coordinator. I'm sorry to bother you, but Mrs. Thompson is here demanding to see you. She says it's urgent family business. Security isn't sure what to do. I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself. Tell her I'm not in the office today. If she wants to schedule a proper appointment, she can call my assistant. I tried that, Lena said, voice dropping to a whisper. She says she's not leaving until she speaks with you. Should we call building security? The last thing we needed was Diane Thompson being escorted out of our offices, creating a scene that would generate gossip throughout Seattle's business community. No, I decided. Tell her I'll be there in 30 minutes. After hanging up, I met my father's questioning gaze. Diane's at the office, refusing to leave until she speaks with me. He frowned. Be careful. The Thompsons aren't accustomed to losing. Neither are the Chens, I replied, gathering my bag. I'll call you after. The drive to our temporary offices took less than 20 minutes, giving me time to prepare mentally for whatever confrontation awaited. As I walked through the reception area, Lena gave me a relieved look. She's in the small conference room, she whispered. I didn't want her making a scene in the lobby. Good thinking, I said. Hold my calls, please. The small conference room door was closed. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and entered without knocking. Diane Thompson sat at the head of the table, my usual seat during meetings. Her designer handbag placed precisely in front of her, her expression a careful mask of concern. Emma, darling, thank you for coming. Her tone suggested I was late to a meeting she had scheduled, rather than responding to her ambush. I remained standing. Diane, What can I do for you that was so urgent it required disrupting our office? Operations? Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Family is always urgent, wouldn't you agree? And we are family, despite recent tensions. If this is about Michael, you should be speaking with him. Michael isn't taking my calls, she said, a hint of ice entering her voice. He seems to be under the impression that your family situation requires him to choose sides. I'm here to clear up that misunderstanding. I crossed my arms. What misunderstanding would that be? That the Thompsons are somehow working against Chen Innovations' interests. She waved a manicured hand dismissively. Robert can be overzealous in his business approach, I admit. But his intentions are good, to strengthen both our families' legacies through collaboration. Collaboration suggests equal standing, I pointed out. Acquisition is what Robert proposed. There's a significant difference. Diane sighed, as if dealing with a particularly slow child. Emma, you must understand that in our circles, business and family are intertwined. The Chen name could benefit enormously from association with Thompson Holdings. We're simply trying to help your family reach its full potential. The condescension was so thick, it was almost laughable. After 3 years of enduring it, something in me finally snapped. The Chen name doesn't need your help, Diane. Our company was successful before your family invested, and it will continue to be successful regardless of your assistance. What you're actually offering is erasure, the slow disappearance of everything my parents built, replaced by the Thompson brand and Thompson methods. Her lips pressed into a thin line. You're being emotional. This is business. No, I countered. For you, this is about control. It always has been. From the moment Michael brought me home, you've been trying to establish dominance over me, over my family, over my company. You called me a gold digger behind my back while simultaneously trying to acquire the very gold you accused me of digging for. Diane's careful composure slipped just for a moment. You did, repeatedly. At the charity gala, at country club lunches, wherever you thought I wouldn't hear. But Seattle is smaller than you think, Diane. Word gets around. She recovered quickly, straightening in her chair. Perhaps I had concerns about your intentions. Any mother would, when her son suddenly becomes involved with someone from outside his social circle. Michael and I met at a tech conference. I have a Stanford MBA and run a successful technology company. I'm hardly some fortune hunter from the wrong side of the tracks. Your background is something I'm proud of, I interrupted. My parents came to this country with nothing and built a company that now employs over 100 people, develops industry-leading technology, and has earned the respect of everyone in our field. Everyone except you and Robert, apparently. Diane's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, Emma. The Thompsons can be powerful allies or formidable obstacles. Robert sits on boards that determine contracts, investments, social connections that could make or break Chen Innovations' future. The threat was clear and utterly in character. I leaned forward, placing my palms flat on the conference table. Let me be absolutely clear, Diane. Any attempt by you or Robert to damage my family's company will be met with immediate legal action. Your investment gives you certain rights, which we will honor. It does not give you the right to interfere in our operations or threaten our business relationships, and it certainly doesn't give you the right to come into my office and try to intimidate me. She blinked, genuinely startled by my directness. For 3 years, I had been polite, accommodating, swallowing her barbs and condescension for Michael's sake, that Emma was gone. Furthermore, I continued, your relationship with your son is between you and him. But if you're wondering why he's not taking your calls, perhaps consider how your treatment of his wife might have affected his willingness to maintain contact. Diane stood abruptly, gathering her handbag with shaking hands. You've turned him against us. His own family. No, Diane. You did that yourself, by forcing him to choose between respecting his wife and pleasing his parents. You never made room for me in your family. Don't be surprised that he's finally making room for himself in mine." Her face flushed with anger. "This isn't over." "Actually, it is," I said calmly. "This conversation, your presence in my office, without an appointment, and your attempts to undermine my company, all over. Security will escort you out." As if on cue, the door opened, and our head of security appeared. I hadn't called him, but apparently someone, Lena most likely, had recognized the volatile situation and taken precautions. "Mrs. Thompson was just leaving," I said. "Please see her to her car." Diane glared at me, her composure cracking. Further, "You'll regret this. Robert won't stand for such disrespect." "Neither will I," I replied simply. "Goodbye, Diane." After she left, I sank into a chair, adrenaline still coursing through my system. For 3 years, I had absorbed the Thompsons' subtle and not-so-subtle insults, their dismissal of my family's achievements, their assumption of superiority. I had done it for Michael, for peace, for the sake of harmony. No more. Whatever happened next, with the company, with my marriage, I was done compromising my dignity or my family's legacy to please people who would never see me as an equal. I called my father from the conference room. "Diane just left," I told him. "It wasn't pleasant. Are you all right?" His concern was evident even through the phone. Better than all right, I realized, surprising myself. I think I finally said everything I've been holding back for 3 years. And how did that feel? I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Like freedom. My next call was to Michael. It went to voicemail, which was unusual. "It's me," I said after the beep. "Your mother just ambushed me at the office. We need to talk. Call me when you can." Hours passed with no response. I immersed myself in work. The European contract negotiations needed attention, and the rebuilding plans required oversight. By evening, I had still heard nothing from Michael, which was increasingly concerning. He was usually responsive, especially when it involved his parents. As I was packing up to leave, my phone finally rang. Not Michael, but a number I didn't recognize. "Emma Chen," I answered. "Ms. Chen, this is Seattle Presbyterian Hospital." My heart stuttered. "We have you listed as the emergency contact for Michael Thompson." Time seemed to slow, blood rushing in my ears. "What happened? Is he okay?" "Mr. Thompson was involved in a car accident this afternoon. He's stable, but he's asking for you." "I'm on my way," I said, already grabbing my coat and keys. The drive to the hospital was a blur of anxiety and regret. Michael had finally taken a stand for me, for us, and now he was hurt. The universe had a cruel sense of timing. At the hospital reception, I gave Michael's name with shaking hands, was directed to the 3rd floor. As the elevator ascended, I tried to prepare myself for whatever I might find. Injuries, pain, the stark vulnerability of someone you love in a hospital bed. What I wasn't prepared for was Robert and Diane Thompson standing outside a room halfway down the corridor, their expressions shifting from concern to coldness as they saw me approach. "What are you doing here?" Diane demanded, stepping forward, as if to physically block me. "The hospital called me," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I'm Michael's emergency contact." "Well, we're his parents," she replied. "And given the circumstances, I think it would be better if you left. He needs rest, not additional stress." Before I could respond, the door behind them opened, and a nurse emerged. "Mrs. Thompson?" she asked, looking between us. "Yes," both Diane and I answered simultaneously. The nurse glanced at her chart. "Emma Thompson? He's asking for you." Diane's face contorted with a mixture of anger and humiliation. I stepped past her, entering the room without another word. Michael lay in the hospital bed, his face bruised, along one side, his arm in a cast. But he was awake, alert, his eyes finding mine immediately. "Emma," he said, relief evident in his voice. "You came." I rushed to his side, carefully taking his uninjured hand. "Of course I came. What happened?" "Car accident. Some idiot ran a red light. I'm okay. Broken arm, concussion, bruised ribs." He attempted a smile that turned into a wince. "Doctor says I'll live." "Thank God," I whispered, pressing my lips to his knuckles. "You didn't answer your phone." I was worried. "It got smashed in the crash. I gave them the landline at the condo, but when you didn't answer there." He trailed off, then his gaze moved past me to the door. "My parents are here?" I nodded. They were outside when I arrived. His expression darkened. "I told the nurse I only wanted to see you. I should have been more specific." "Michael—" "No," he interrupted, his voice stronger than I would have expected given his condition. "I meant what I said yesterday, Emma. I'm done letting them dictate our lives, done with their disrespect toward you and your family." "You don't have to handle this now," I said gently. "You're injured. Rest." He shook his head carefully. "No more delays. No more putting it off for a better time. There is no better time." He squeezed my hand. "Will you ask them to come in?" "Both of them?" I hesitated, concerned about his health, about the stress of confrontation in his condition. But there was a resolve in his eyes I couldn't ignore. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." I stepped out, finding Robert and Diane still waiting, their expressions guarded. "He wants to see both of you," I said neutrally. They followed me into the room, Diane immediately moving to Michael's side, opposite from where I stood. "Darling, you should be resting, not having visitors," she said, pointedly looking my way. "My wife isn't a visitor, Mother," Michael replied, his tone firm despite his injuries. "And we need to get something clear, right now." Robert stepped forward, his commanding presence filling the small hospital room. "Son, this isn't the time for—" "It's exactly the time," Michael interrupted. "When you're lying in a hospital bed after a car nearly killed you, it clarifies what's important." He looked between his parents. "I've spent 3 years watching you undermine and disrespect Emma. I've let it happen because it was easier than confronting you. That ends today." Diane's expression hardened. "Michael, you're not thinking clearly. The concussion has nothing to do with this," he finished. "I mean every word. Your behavior toward Emma and her family has been inexcusable. The investment was made under specific terms, which you've both attempted to circumvent. And today, Mother, you went to Emma's office to threaten her." Diane gasped in indignation. "I did no such thing. I was trying to mend fences, to help her understand our perspective. By telling her the Thompsons could be formidable obstacles, by implying Dad would use his board connections to damage Chen Innovations." Michael's voice was steady, his gaze unflinching. "That's not mending fences. That's intimidation." Robert stepped closer to the bed. "Son, business negotiations can be complex. Emma may have misinterpreted—" "She didn't misinterpret anything," Michael cut in. "And this isn't about business. It's about respect. Something neither of you has shown to my wife or her family since the day you met them." I stood quietly, watching this man I had married finally, definitively choose his side. Not his parents. Not mine, but ours. The family we had created together. The partnership that should have always come first. "So here's what's going to happen," Michael continued, his voice gaining strength. "You will honor the investment agreement exactly as written. No interference, no suggestions, no attempts at acquisition. You will treat Emma and her parents with the respect they deserve. And if you can't do that, then you won't be part of our lives until you can." The silence that followed was deafening. Diane looked as though she'd been struck, all color draining from her face. Robert's jaw clenched, the muscle twitching visibly. "You don't mean that," Diane said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're your family." "Emma is my family too," Michael replied softly. "And I've failed to protect her from your judgment and condescension for too long. I love you both, but I won't sacrifice my marriage to please you anymore." Robert placed a hand on Diane's shoulder, his expression carefully controlled. "You've been through a traumatic experience. We should discuss this when you're recovered." "Nothing will change," Michael said firmly. "My mind is made up. The choice is yours now." Robert nodded once, a businessman recognizing terms he didn't like but couldn't negotiate further. "We'll let you rest," he said, guiding Diane toward the door. She moved reluctantly, looking back at Michael with hurt and confusion. After they left, Michael exhaled slowly, wincing at the movement. "That was harder than I thought it would be." I moved closer, carefully sitting on the edge of the bed. "You didn't have to do that now. Not like this." "I did," he insisted. "When the hospital called them, all I could think was that you might arrive and they would try to keep you away, to control the situation like they always do." He reached for my hand. "I couldn't let that happen. Not again." "And you're sure? About the boundaries? About potentially cutting them off if they don't respect them?" He nodded, wincing slightly at the movement. "I've never been more sure. Of anything. Except marrying you, despite everything." His eyes searched mine. "Is it too late? For us?" I looked at him, bruised and vulnerable in the hospital bed, but stronger in his convictions than I had ever seen him. The man I had fallen in love with was still there, had perhaps always been there beneath the layers of family expectation and obligation. "No," I said, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. "It's not too late. But things have to be different." "They will be," he promised. "Starting now, continuing every day. No more compromises on what matters most." He squeezed my hand. "Will you take me home when they release me? Not to the condo, but to your parents' house? I think that's where we need to be right now." I nodded, emotion tightening my throat. "They'll have the guest room ready." It wasn't everything, wasn't an immediate solution to years of complex family dynamics and hurtful patterns, but it was a beginning, a new beginning, with clearer boundaries and stronger foundations than we had managed before. As I sat beside Michael's hospital bed, watching him finally drift into needed sleep, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, the Golddigger narrative was finally being laid to rest. Not because the Thompsons had suddenly recognized my worth, but because Michael had finally, unequivocally, stood up for it himself. 2 weeks after Michael's accident, we gathered in the conference room of Chen Innovation's temporary headquarters. The atmosphere was tense but determined as our legal team finalized documents spread across the polished table. My mother had worked miracles, assembling a consortium of investors, long-term clients, industry partners, even a few competing firms who respected our innovation enough to support our independence. "The final offer," our attorney said, sliding the document toward me. $2.7 million for the complete buyout of Thompson Holdings' investment. I reviewed the terms, noting the premium well above what Robert Thompson had invested. "It's more than fair." "Fair isn't the issue," Michael said from beside me, his cast recently removed but his arm still in a sling. "It's whether my father will accept being outmaneuvered." We'd spent the past 2 weeks in a carefully orchestrated ballet of legal maneuvers. Thompson Holdings had escalated their audit demands, attempted to contact our European clients directly, and even filed preliminary injunctions to protect their investment. Each move had been countered, but the strain on our operations and team morale was mounting. "Send it," my father decided. It's time to end this. As our lawyer left to deliver the offer, my phone chimed with a text from Diane. It was the first direct contact she'd attempted since the hospital confrontation. "Let's talk, just us women. Lunch tomorrow?" I showed Michael, who frowned. Divide and conquer. Classic. "I'm not afraid to face her," I said. "Maybe it's time for some woman-to-woman." Honesty. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Just be careful. She's at her most dangerous when she feels cornered." The following day, I met Diane at an upscale restaurant downtown. She'd chosen a prominent table, dressed impeccably as always, her demeanor one of practiced nonchalance. "Emma, darling," she greeted, air-kissing my cheek. "You look well. Has Michael's recovery been progressing?" "He's doing much better," I replied, taking my seat. "His arm is healing nicely." "Wonderful. When will he be moving back home? The condo has been so empty without you both." I met her gaze directly. "Diane, I think we both know this isn't a social lunch. What is it you really want to discuss?" Her smile tightened. "Direct as always. Very well. Robert received your buyout offer yesterday." "And?" "It's insulting," she stated flatly. "After we rescued your family's company in its hour of need, this is the gratitude we receive? A forced buyout?" "The offer is significantly above your initial investment," I pointed out. "And rescue implies altruism that was never present. It was a business transaction, nothing more." Diane leaned forward. "You've turned my son against his family, against everything we've built for generations. Does that make you feel powerful, Emma? Destroying a family's legacy?" "Michael made his own decisions," I replied, keeping my voice level. "All I ever asked was for respect. For me, for my family, for the company my parents built. You and Robert couldn't provide that basic courtesy." "Respect is earned," she snapped. "In our world." "That's just it," I interrupted gently. "Your world isn't the only one that matters. The sooner you recognize that, the sooner we can all move forward." "By accepting your buyout? Surrendering our rightful influence?" I shook my head. "It's a fair market solution to an untenable situation. You invested in a company you immediately tried to consume. We're offering you a profitable exit." "And if we refuse?" "Then the legal battles continue. We've filed counter-injunctions against your improper client contacts. We've documented every attempt to circumvent our agreement." I sighed, softening my tone. "Diane, this doesn't have to be destructive. You can take a profitable return on your investment and maintain a relationship with your son, or you can pursue control you were never promised and potentially lose both." She sat back, studying me with new eyes. "You're not what I expected when Michael brought you home." "I know. You expected someone you could manipulate or intimidate, someone who would gradually surrender to the Thompson way or conveniently disappear." A flicker of something, recognition perhaps, crossed her face. "Robert won't be easily persuaded." "Then persuade him," I suggested. "Show the business acumen you've always possessed but rarely get credit for. Help him see that. A clean, profitable exit serves everyone better than a protracted public conflict." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "You think I have that kind of influence?" "I think you're far smarter than you let people see," I replied honestly. "And I think, deep down, you want your son to be happy more than you want another company acquisition." Diane was silent for a long moment, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping lightly on the tablecloth. "I'll speak with Robert," she said finally, "but I make no promises." 3 days later, Robert Thompson himself requested a meeting. Not at Thompson Holdings, not at Chen Innovations, but at a neutral location, a private room in an exclusive downtown club. He asked that Michael and I attend, along with my parents. "They've accepted," Michael said in disbelief after receiving the call. "My father never agrees to neutral territory." He always insists people come to him. We arrived to find Robert and Diane already seated at a round table, the buyout documents centered before them. Robert stood as we entered, his expression unreadable. Michael, Emma, David, Linda. He nodded to each of us in turn. Thank you for coming. We took our seats, the tension in the room palpable. Robert cleared his throat. After careful consideration, Thompson Holdings has decided to accept your buyout offer, with one modification. He slid the document toward us. We've added a non-disparagement clause. What happens between our families stays private. No public statements about investment disputes or family disagreements. My father reviewed the addition, then nodded. That's acceptable. Good. Robert produced a pen. Then let's conclude this business matter efficiently. As the documents were signed, I watched Diane carefully. Her expression remained composed, but I caught a flicker of resignation, and perhaps relief, in her eyes. Whatever arguments had occurred behind closed doors, she had apparently advocated for resolution over continued conflict. After the papers were signed and our attorneys had witnessed everything, an awkward silence fell. It was Michael who finally broke it. I hope this resolution can be the beginning of a new chapter, he said, addressing his parents directly. Not just for our business relationship, but for our family one as well. Robert's jaw tightened. You've made your choices very clear, Michael. I've chosen my wife and my principles, Michael corrected gently. That doesn't mean I've rejected my family, only certain behaviors that were damaging my marriage. Diane reached across the table, surprising us all by taking Michael's hand. We may need time, she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. This isn't how we envisioned your future. I know, he acknowledged, but it's a future with possibility for happiness, for growth, for genuine partnership. He glanced at me. Isn't that worth embracing, even if it looks different from what you planned? Robert remained stoic, but something shifted in Diane's expression, a crack in the perfect facade, a glimpse of the mother beneath the socialite exterior. Perhaps, she conceded, with time. As we left the meeting, legal ownership of Chen, innovations fully restored to my family and our new consortium of aligned investors, Michael took my hand. They'll come around, he said. My mother sooner than my father, but eventually. And if they don't? He smiled, the expression reaching his eyes in a way it rarely had during our early years together. Then we build our life anyway, on our terms, with our values. 6 months later, the rebuilt Chen Innovations facility celebrated its grand opening. The European contract had been secured, production was exceeding projections, and Michael had found his footing as an independent consultant, leveraging his financial expertise without the Thompson name. To our surprise, Diane attended the opening reception, arriving alone but with a small gift, a framed photo of Michael and me from our wedding day. I found this while reorganizing, she said, her attempt at casualness belied by the nervous way she straightened her jacket. Thought you might want it for your office. It was a small gesture, imperfect and tentative, but a beginning. As I watched her awkwardly accept a tour from my mother, I realized that the Golddigger narrative had finally been laid to rest, not through arguments or defenses, but through living our truth until it became undeniable. Some wounds heal slowly. Some relationships transform gradually. But standing in the gleaming new facility, my husband at my side, both our names now officially associated with Chen Innovations' leadership team, I knew we had emerged stronger, from the fire that had threatened to consume us, just as my parents had always done, building something lasting from the flames of challenge. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't. Want to pass these up? Just click and check them out.